Okay, ready to dive into another deep dive with me.
Let's do it. Always up for a good deep dive.
Today, we're taking a trip back to 1960s Britain. Get ready for a story wilder than any soap opera.
Oh, I love a good dose of historical drama. What's on the menu today?
Ever heard the phrase, dirty Duchess?
Hmm. Rings a bell. Vaguely. Refreshed my memory.
Well, back then, it wasn't just a saying. It was a label attached to a real person, Margaret, the Duchess of Argyll. And her story is full of scandalous Polaroids and a headline-grabbing divorce that was the longest and most expensive in British history up to that point.
Now that's what I call a hook. Sounds juicy.
Oh, it is. And we'll be using the podcast Noble Blood as our guide through this whole mess.
Sounds like a good source. So, what made this Duchess so dirty, so to speak?
Well, to really get it, we need to rewind a bit, back to Margaret's early life.
Makes sense. To understand the scandal, we need the backstory. So tell me, what was her childhood like?
Imagine a life of unimaginable wealth. I mean, we're talking the only child of a self-made millionaire.
Wow, so we're talking silver spoon territory here.
Oh, absolutely. Luxurious homes, designer clothes, high society gatherings. She had it all. But of course, there's a...
Always a but. What was lurking behind that glittering facade?
Well, her relationship with her mother was, let's just say, complicated.
Ah, the classic mother-daughter drama. What was the issue?
Her mother, Helen, was completely fixated on appearances, like obsessed with making Margaret the perfect picture of beauty and grace. And get this, she even criticized Margaret for her stammer.
Oh, that's harsh. It's one thing to pressure your child, but to attack something like a speech impediment, that's rough.
Yeah, talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Hmm.
And that kind of pressure on top of the crazy privilege she was born into probably played a role in shaping Margaret's personality.
I can see that. It's not just poor little rich girl. It's deeper than that.
Right, exactly. There's a whole psychological layer to her story that people often miss when they just focus on the scandal. So we've got this wealthy upbringing, a complicated mother. How does that translate into Margaret's grand entrance into society?
Picture 1930s London, the era of debutantes and grand balls. Margaret, at just 17, bursts onto the scene, stunning everyone with her beauty and her incredible fashion sense.
Yeah, that's prime tabloid fodder right there.
Oh, absolutely. She became a sensation overnight, but she wasn't just a pretty face. Margaret was strategic. She even had a system, she called it the Wiggum system, for picking dance partners at these events.
The Wiggum system. I'm intrigued. Break it down for me.
Basically, she'd dance with everyone at the beginning of the evening, and then for the rest of the night, she'd narrow it down to just her favorites.
Smart. Keep everyone happy, but still end up with the best catches. Talk about playing the game. And her coming out party, I bet that was quite the event.
It was a spectacle. Her parents went all out, 40,000 pounds.
Whoa, 40,000 pounds. Back then.
Yeah, that's like millions in today's money. 400 guests, a turquoise gown dripping with diamonds and pearls, a full orchestra. It was like something straight out of a movie.
Wow, talk about making a statement. So she was the it girl of the moment, huh?
Oh, for sure. Photographed constantly, every move scrutinized and reported on by the press. Almost like she was destined for the spotlight, even at that young age.
Yeah, but we all know how that goes. All that glitters isn't gold. What about her first marriage?
She married an American businessman, Charles Sweeney. But the marriage wasn't exactly smooth sailing. Multiple miscarriages, for one thing, which must have been absolutely heartbreaking.
So cracks in the fairy tale already.
Sadly, yes. And to add to that, Charles was, shall we say, not the most faithful husband.
Oh, no. So already some trouble in paradise.
Yeah.
And is this where our future Duke enters the picture?
This is it. Amidst all this marital unhappiness, Margaret encounters Ian Campbell, who would later become the Duke of Argyll. They meet on a train to Paris.
A chance meeting on a train.
Yeah.
How romantic.
You'd think so, right? But here's where it gets a bit ironic. Years before this, Ian apparently pointed Margaret out at a nightclub and told his then-wife, "See that captivating creature? I'm going to marry her someday."
Wow, he had his sights set on her long before they actually met. That's bold.
It seems that way. And for Margaret, who was stuck in this unhappy marriage, the idea of a charming man and becoming a duchess probably felt like a dream come true.
Yeah, but as we all know, be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. Because once they tied the knot, Ian's true colors started to show, and let's just say, he wasn't quite the Prince Charming she'd imagined.
Yeah, the Duke wasn't exactly who Margaret thought he was. It turned out he had a bit of a dark side, like alcoholism, drug abuse, gambling debts, you name it.
Yikes. Not exactly the picture of a respectable duke.
Right. And to top it off, he became verbally and physically abusive toward Margaret.
Oh, wow. So it was a pretty classic case of appearances being deceiving. Did Margaret try to leave him? I mean, surely she had options. She did try, but it wasn't easy. Remember, this is the 1960s. Divorce was still a major social taboo, especially for someone of Margaret's status. Plus, she seemed to believe she could fix him. You know, that whole idea of changing someone back into the person you thought they were.
Yeah, I get it. That hope can be hard to let go of. But even with the abuse, she still held on.
She did, and I think it was more than just social pressure or fear of scandal. Remember how we talked about her upbringing, that need for appearances and social standing? Well, being a duchess was a huge part of her identity. Leaving Ian meant losing that title.
Right. It's like she was trapped in this gilded cage she'd built for herself.
Yeah.
But even with all that going on, there's this other incident, the one with Ian's secretary. What was that all about?
Ah, yes, the infamous Liel suit. This is where we see a different side of Margaret. A side that's not just about enduring abuse, but also about being manipulative and, well, kind of vindictive.
Okay, spill the tea. What did she do?
Margaret became convinced that Ian's secretary, Yvonne, was trying to sabotage her, like
Wow.
full-on plotting against her.
Wow, that's a bit paranoid, no?
It does seem that way, and she went to some pretty extreme lengths to prove it. She actually faked a telegram from Yvonne to Ian, accusing Yvonne of trying to ruin Margaret financially.
She faked a telegram. That's next-level scheming.
Right, and of course this whole thing blew up into a libel suit, and Margaret had to apologize in the end.
Talk about a mess. So at this point, their marriage was already on shaky ground, to say the least.
It definitely was. But this incident also shows us how important reputation and social standing were back then. Like, people would go to great lengths to protect them.
Okay, so we've got a marriage falling apart, accusations flying around,
Yeah.
but this is still before the real scandal breaks, right? The one with the...
The Polaroid scene.
Yes.
Yeah.
The infamous Polaroids.
Yes, exactly. But before we get to those, there's something else we need to address. You see, while Margaret was busy playing these mind games with Ian's secretary, she was also, shall we say, keeping herself busy with some extracurricular activities.
The extracurricular activities, you mean like...
Let's just say Margaret wasn't exactly a faithful wife herself. And that's what ultimately leads to the downfall of their marriage and the eruption of a scandal that would shock all of Britain.
Okay, I think we need a moment to prepare ourselves here. This is where the story takes a sharp turn. We're about to enter the full force of the Dirty Duchess scandal.
You got it. And those Polaroids, oh boy, they weren't just some gossip fodder. They became the centerpiece of one of the most sensationalized divorce trials in history.
Okay, let's hear it. What happened? How did those pictures come to light?
It all starts with Margaret going on a trip to Australia, for her ducal duties. She leaves Ian back in London, and while she's away, he decides to do a little snooping.
Uh-oh. Snooping never leads to anything good. What did he find?
Well, he finds Margaret's diary, but it wasn't filled with travel logs or charity work notes. Oh no, it was a detailed account of all of her affairs, names, dates, times, everything.
Wow. So the rumors about her infidelity were true.
Oh yeah. But the diary was just the beginning. Ian also stumbled upon a collection of Polaroid pictures, and they were far from your average family snapshots.
Okay, here come the infamous Polaroids.
The one that really caught everyone's attention was a picture of Margaret, let's just say in a compromising position with a man whose head was conveniently cut off in the frame.
Wait, the head is missing. Talk about adding fuel to the fire. The tabloids must have had a field day with that.
They did. The headless man became a national obsession. Everyone was trying to figure out who he was, analyzing every detail of the photo. And to make things even more scandalous, there were little notes written around the image. Before, during, and finished.
It's almost like it was staged, like she wanted to get caught.
That's a good point. It does make you wonder, considering her history of attention-seeking behavior. But those photos weren't the only thing that set Ian off. He also found a bunch of letters that looked like they were written by his ex-wife, Louise.
Letters from his ex-wife. Why would Margaret have those?
Well, here's the twist. Margaret had actually taken letters from Louise and cut out words and phrases, pasting them together to create these Frankenstein messages.
Whoa, seriously, what was the point of that?
The content of those letters, it was all designed to make Ian's sons look illegitimate.
So she was trying to discredit his children. Why would she do that?
It seems like a desperate attempt to secure her own position. Maybe she thought if she could undermine his heirs, it would make her claim to the dukedom stronger. Or maybe she was trying to have a child with Ian and pass it off as his heir. Remember, the podcast mentioned a plan to bring a baby from Poland.
Okay, this is getting crazy complicated, like a twisted game of chess. And it's sad to think about the real people caught in the middle of all this. Ian's sons, this potential baby.
It is. And this is where the story takes another dark turn. Ian, armed with the diary, the Polaroids, and the fake letters, decides to file for divorce, accusing Margaret of adultery.
And not just with one man, right? There's that shocking number that came out during the trial.
You're remembering correctly. He claimed she had 88 lovers during their marriage.
88, even for the swinging 60s, that seems a bit much, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But remember, this was a calculated move by Ian. He wanted to portray Margaret as this deviant woman consumed by her desires.
Yeah, it sounds like those double standards were alive and well back then.
Oh, absolutely. A man with many affairs. He's a rogue, a playboy. But a woman, not so much.
So this is where the whole thing becomes a massive media circus, right? Everyone wants the juicy details, especially about the mysterious headless man.
You got it. The courtroom was packed, and the press was having a field day reporting every salacious detail. It was quite a spectacle. Margaret was questioned on the stand for hours.
And the judge, Lord Wheatley, didn't he have a reputation for being pretty harsh, especially when it came to, well, sexual crimes?
He did, and his judgment in this case was brutal. He basically labeled Margaret a nymphomaniac, a woman driven by disgusting sexual activities.
Ouch. That's harsh. So the media had already been having a field day, but I bet that judgment just poured gasoline on the fire.
It did. The tabloids went wild. They called her all sorts of awful names. Dirty Duchess, Harlot Duchess, Fellatio Duchess. It was relentless.
It's like they took this complex woman with a complicated story and reduced her to a few sensationalized headlines.
Exactly. And Margaret, who had once enjoyed the attention of the press, was now their target. Later, she talked about how cruel the tabloids had become, but she also admitted that she had helped to create the monster.
So we're left with this big question mark hanging over the whole thing. Who was this headless man caught up in the Duchess of Argyll's scandal?
Right. It's a real head-scratcher, a mystery for the ages. Over the years, there have been so many theories.
Like what? Who were the main suspects?
Oh, you name it. Some people thought it was a Hollywood actor, others a high-ranking politician.
Really? A politician? Wow, that would be explosive.
It would. And some folks even tried to analyze the handwriting on those Polaroid captions, hoping for a match.
Wait, seriously? Someone actually tried to play handwriting detective?
Yep. The master of roles at the time, no less. He thought it might be someone in the government, someone who couldn't risk being exposed.
Makes sense. But did they ever crack the case?
Nope. The mystery remains unsolved. Margaret took that secret to the grave.
Well, that's disappointing. I love a good solved mystery. But I guess some things are just destined to remain unanswered.
I guess so. But even without knowing the headless man's identity, I think we can still learn a lot from Margaret's story.
Yeah, for sure. It's more than just a salacious scandal, isn't it? It's a story about a real person, with all her flaws and complexities.
Exactly. And it makes you think about the role of the media then and now, how they can build someone up and then tear them down in an instant.
Absolutely. And it makes you think about societal expectations, especially for women.
Right. Margaret was both a victim of those expectations and someone who, in some ways, played into them.
It's a real cautionary tale, isn't it?
Yeah. A reminder that things aren't always what they seem. And that everyone, even a duchess, is human.
Well, that's a good note to end on. A reminder to look beyond the headlines and see the people behind the stories. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the life of the Duchess of Argyll. It's been a wild ride. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on any more deep dives into fascinating stories like this one.